Hi, everybody. This is Emily Brooks and Jon Meyers from Write Better Together.
Hey, everybody.
And we wanted to share an opportunity with you all. Even though we can't make it because of prior commitments, we wanted to let you all know about a writing retreat coming up with WriterCon.
So the folks at WriterCon, which happens every September, are actually having a July Writers Retreat at Canebrake. Canebrake Resort is in Wagoner, Oklahoma on Fort Gibson Lake. It's a 300-acre complex. It's beautiful. There is a link on their website. So you want to go to writercon.com/retreat, and it'll show you all the choices that you have. So you can pick single occupancy, double occupancy, triple occupancy. You can pick a hotel room versus a cabin. There's different meal plans that you can pick. And of course, there's writer instruction. No matter what your genre is, there's something there for you. And we hope that you can make it.
Sounds fantastic.
It does. Welcome, everybody, to Write Better Together. I'm Jon Meyers. Hey, look, everybody, it's Emily Brooks.
Hello, Jon Meyers.
Hi, what are we talking about today?
We've got quite the list and quite the guest.
Oh, yay.
We have our friend Adrian Sanders on here
Yes.
to talk today about creativity through boredom.
Oh, I'm bored already.
No, it's a very, very good conversation. We're so grateful to have her. But before that, we're going to have a response to our call to action, or a just listener response, I think. Um,
Yes.
and then we'll come back from our interview with Adrian to have a Jon Meyers segment. Hey, Jon Meyers segment.
Yay.
Yes, I'm going to teach Jon Meyers something.
Yes.
And then we're going to play a game.
Yay.
And
That's,
Adrian, I'm doing this all out of order today. Adrian's going to give the call to action.
oh,
Mhm.
I remember that. That was a good one.
It is a really good one, so stay tuned.
Yes.
So, Jon Meyers, how did you get out
Yes.
of your bubble this week?
Well, funny that you should ask. So this was not on my stupid walk, hashtag stupid walk. I was driving home from church, as one does on Sunday, and in a really nice neighborhood, like one notch below a gated neighborhood, like where people don't mow their own lawns, right? That kind of neighborhood. And I happened to cross the lemonade stand with two
Oh,
little 5 and 6 year old girls selling lemonade. Um,
cute.
and I drove by, and then I was like, why did I drive by? And and because there was like no one. I go to church at 8 o'clock in the morning, so this was like at 9:30 in the morning, and there's no one out, um and then I felt convicted because I didn't go back, and then I just couldn't take it anymore. I had to go back, right? And so at this point, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I decided to go back, and I found that. So it was hard to find, first of all, but I found them, and they were still there. And they had another customer when I got there, so that was good. And
Mhm.
then their dad was there in a lawn chair, so it wasn't just a 5 and a 6 year old girl out there. And so it was 90 degrees. I had the top down, right, so it was like super sweaty hot, and and I was like, what do you got? And and because I don't like lemonade, by the way. And and so um and so they had lemonade or fruit punch, and I was like, oh great, because I don't like lemonade, I'll have a fruit punch. And I don't really care that much about fruit punch either, but I just wanted them to be engaged in commerce, and to have a customer and feel good about themselves. And so I it's gone because I drank it. So it's not 2 days later, and I still have it. But here's the cup for people at home. It's a neon green solo cup. Matches the dots on this chair, by the way, that I'm sitting in. And it was like full of crushed ice, and that was like the perfect thing for a 90-degree day. Isn't that a nice size for $1? Like,
Yeah.
where else can you get that for $1? And then I told I told the dad, I'm like, well, too bad that whenever we record this, I'm going to talk about this on my podcast, and but you guys will be long gone because it won't come out until July or something, and they were packing up to go to lunch, and by the time I got back, and he's like, oh, I drive a lot for whatever I do for my living, I'll listen to it. So I'm like, great, so it's right better together. And I should have had my card. You always have your card with you, people,
Yeah.
because I didn't have my card with me, and so we have a new listener,
Nice.
or maybe 3 new listeners, because I told them that that I would do that, and then so I drive home, and I knew they were tearing down, and I was like, okay, what did I? So I didn't. That's not a story. That's me walking out to the mailbox. So I don't have a story, and I just have a happening, and and then I couldn't go back and get the real story, because the real story is, what are you saving up for? What are you making this money for, right? And
Mhm.
so yesterday, we're filming this on a Tuesday, so that story that's not a story was on a Sunday. On Monday, went on my stupid walk, and um and it was uneventful. And then uh I got in the car, went back because I was going to a store, and 1 block away from my walk there was another lemonade stand. In
Oh.
now this is in my neighborhood where we mow our own lawns, or actually my landlord mows my lawn, but um uh and um so I had a chance, right, to ask the question. And so I pull up and I get I did not tell this little girl was 5 years old and all by herself, so I did not tell her about the podcast or anything. But I did. So here's hers. That's her cup, and so it's probably 6 ounces. There was no ice, as opposed to the other one. It was almost like a slushy that was 8 ounces, but it was the same dollar, and so it was $1, and it was cold because it was in like a cold dispenser, and but I got to ask her, what are what are you saving up for? And what would you guess that this 6-year-old girl said she was saving up for?
If I was a 6-year-old girl selling lemonade, which I once was,
Oh,
I
yay.
would be I'd be saving up for whatever the new popular stuffed animal thing is, like whether it's a Pokemon or a Neopet or whatever it is that they have today. It would be something like that.
Oh, so I never had a lemonade stand, but I had a comic book stand, and because so we haven't talked about this, but my birthday is on November 11th, and when I was in elementary school, we didn't have Monday holidays yet. Oh, you know that because you're 2 months older than me, and
Yeah, I
so
remember
this
those guys.
this is before Monday holidays, so I never had to go to never had to go to school on my birthday, and if it was a Wednesday or whatever, because it was Veterans Day, and plus there was a parade just for me on my birthday. My parents owned a Tasty Freeze, which is like a Dairy Queen, so I had free ice cream all
Oh,
the time, and
nice.
my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, owned a news agency, and so that's he would get in all the magazines and comic books, and he would distribute them to the grocery stores and drugstores. So growing up, I never had to go to school on my birthday. I had free ice cream and free comic books. And was I privileged or what? And
Oh,
so when I was in his distribution center, I would read a bunch of comic books, and then he would let me take some, but I couldn't take every one that I read. And then so I would take some, and then I would sell them at my comic book stand out in my front yard, and then I would use that money to buy the different brand comic books that my grandfather did not distribute. And so I had free inventory. So that is not what. So this little girl was not going to buy comic books. She was not going to buy a plush animal or a stuffed animal. She was going to buy a new iPhone.
oh my word.
And so I'm like, whoa. I'm like, how many more cups? Because I didn't want to say like which one or anything. Like how many more cups? And plus, I wanted to know if she realized how many cups that she had to sell to get an iPhone.
Mhm.
I'm like, how many more cups do you need to sell? And so she had a little tally there, and she's like, it looks like about 150 more cups. And I'm like, oh, and she goes, yeah, because my mom said that if I got to $150, she'd pay the rest. So she's getting a newer, more expensive iPhone than even the $150 one, and I gave her $1. The On Sunday I gave, even though the fruit punch was $1, I gave them $2 because it was two girls and I didn't want them to fight over the dollar, so I gave them $2. So that little girl's $1 closer to her iPhone. Just what
So
she
that's
doesn't
funny
need.
because Adrian's going to talk about our addiction to technology
I
today,
know.
and we're going to talk about our childhoods where we didn't have that. So this is a very connected.
I know. And the article that she shared with us started with the phrase "when I was a child."
Yep.
And so when I was a child,
Wow.
I sold comic books.
Connections all over the place.
This girl saved up for an iPhone.
When I was a child, I had stuffed animals, not iPhones. Goodness.
All right. What'd you do outside of your bubble?
So you're talking about on Sunday. On Sunday, my entire church got out of their bubble.
Oh,
So it was Pentecost when
yes.
the disciples are sent out,
Yes.
when all the people are sent out. And so we went out, and so we had it was Serve Sunday, and so we all wore t-shirts, and we went around the community. So some people, like my parents, went to a nursing home and sang songs. Other people went to the local school and dug a French drain. My group went to, there's a woman in our Sunday school class, a single mom. We did landscaping, and then one of our Sunday school group members, he fixes appliances. So he went and fixed her dishwasher and her dryer, and he fixed her door. And so it was really, really neat because before everybody did that, we all like stood in our sanctuary, like getting ready, and we sang a song, and then we went out and we served the community. And what's funny is a lot of people complained that we were doing this because they were like, "Oh, we shouldn't be working on Sunday, and we shouldn't be doing this on Sunday. We need to have our worship service."
Oh, the
And
church people complained. I thought you
the
meant
church
the
people
people you were
complained.
helping complained.
No, there was a bunch of church people who complained about this because it was so out of the ordinary for them and broke
Aw,
their routine. And our pastor was just like, sorry, oh well. Like, sorry, not sorry.
get over
Um,
yourself.
it was awesome. So I mean, that's a huge, like, getting out of your bubble. Like, we all got out of our bubble.
And you served other people.
Yeah, our pastor always says the church is most the church when you're not in the building. And so we've tried to actually be that, do that. It was really inspiring. It was an inspiring day.
We did that not on Pentecost, but after the tornado, and uh, it
Mm,
was, so my church is big. It's probably 2,400 people now, and maybe more now. We've added a lot this year, but it didn't wind up. It wound up being like people were joining. Like it didn't wind up being just the people from the church, right? And
yeah, that
so
was,
you
yeah.
could be like clearing branches and rubble or whatever with people that didn't, like, from the Middle East, that didn't even speak English and weren't Christians
Mhm.
and stuff, but we were all just worked together, and it didn't matter, and so that was cool. So
That's really
um
neat. Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad I thought at first, I thought you were saying the people you were helping were complaining. I'm glad they didn't
No,
complain.
no, they
No one
didn't.
complained about
They're
having
very
their
grateful.
That's good.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Good job.
So we have a call to action, or sorry, we have a response that's not a call to action response, but is a response, correct?
It is a response to our um, speculative fiction definition from Dr. David Lenore. He got his doctorate. I didn't know this. He has a master's in education, doctorate in English from Auburn.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't know that's where it was. For some reason I thought he was from Michigan, but anyway. And so in that previous episode, you can look it up. I don't remember if it's an afterthought, but it's the one that if you're looking at it on YouTube, it has a yellow cover on it instead of a purple one. And if you're searching for it on Spotify or iTunes or something, just look for speculative fiction. And there's 3 definitions. And my point in that mini episode was the third definition was so useless that it didn't even become a definition anymore. It like listed every like it even listed things that were their own genre, and so and which isn't what speculative fiction is. It was just this big umbrella term. So Lenore calls it a blanket term, and here's what he had to say. The blanket term does have some utility that I kind of, I just added a kind of, he didn't say kind of, that I appreciate, but I've always regarded it with suspicion because some authors, notably Margaret Atwood, use it to try to create a false class level. They're just too good to be associated with all that other stuff, though they'll happily take the money from the fans of that other stuff. How's that for a hot take?
Whoa, that is a hot take.
But it's right.
Like,
Isn't
yeah,
it
it's
true?
true. Yeah. I love it. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Lenore. Here's our topic or our discussion.
With
What's
Adrian
happening?
Sanders? Is it time for Adrian Sanders?
It's time for Adrian Sanders. Here's our conversation with Adrian.
Great. She's a very informative person, isn't she?
Yes, absolutely.
Hey, as you know, I'm Jon Meyers. Hey, look, everybody, it's Emily Brooks. Who's this other person that's in this window?
Hey, look, everybody, it's Adrian Sanders.
Oh, my goodness. Where'd she come from?
Welcome, Adrian. We're so glad to have you here. Adrian is a full-time copy editor living in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. She's a graduate of Western Kentucky University, where she received a Bachelor of Arts in English and Creative Writing. Her poems have appeared in various print and online publications, such as Indiana Review Online, Juke Joint, Maudlin House, Gasher, and others. Sanders' chapbooks are This Side of the Dirt and Lynchian. They can both be found at BS Lit and Alien Buddha Press, respectively.
You can also find them in my hand right there in the screen.
In the Jon
There they
Meyers
are.
bookshelf.
Autographed by Adrian herself, which leads to my first question. We shared in a previous episode your writing advice from someone named Jacobs. Remind me who?
Jessica Jacobs.
Jessica Jacobs, and she drew a line through her name, and then wrote all around it. Why did she draw a line through her name? Do you know?
I don't know. I've actually seen both, and I have read like conversations, I think, on like social media about both. So there are some people in the camp that like, I don't want to cross my name out. I worked hard for this like publication. I'm going to keep it there, kind of thing. And then others I think are seeing it as like, I'm replacing this typeset with my actual autograph. So yeah, either way.
Okay.
Yeah. I've seen people do it both ways.
I have a whole shelf over there of autographed books, which is normally where yours would be, and I am gonna have to pay attention if how many other people cross theirs out.
Interesting. Never even heard of that.
And then what Emily and I we're gonna have to decide: are we crosser outers?
I don't think so. I actually kind of dread signing my name because I have really bad handwriting.
Oh.
I mean, it would be amazing if like somebody actually wanted my autograph, I guess, but
my signature's on my business card, so it'll look the same as what it does.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Adrian, what is our big idea for this episode?
Our big idea is that you need boredom. I'm putting boredom in air quotes, to be creative, and maybe like productive to a degree.
Yikes. I'm in trouble. I'm in so much trouble. Tell us why, because I'm in trouble.
So the idea, I actually read this first in a book called Stolen Focus. I hope I'm pronouncing the author's name right. It is Johann Hari. Um, and it is like a social sciences book about how like we as a society have just lost our ability to pay attention. And a lot of that you're probably thinking is like, oh, technology. And that is part of it. But a lot of it is like our hustle culture, our diet, our sleep, and things like that. But when you are bored, or rather like you're not stimulated, so like no TV, no phone, maybe no music with lyrics, depending on how that affects you, reading even. When you allow your brain to just kind of like calm down, and kind of like relax and not be engaged, that is when it is making connections and coming up with new ideas. So it takes things that you have learned. It's storing things in your short and long term memory, and it's making connections. So that's why if you are really stuck on something and maybe you go for a walk, an idea comes to you because your brain is doing something it doesn't have to think about, like walking. For me, I think of a lot of things in the shower because that's a very like mundane task. So if you're needing to like solve a problem, or like in general, or in your writing, if you're doing laundry, don't do it while you're watching TV. Or if you're doing dishes, like don't have on, music, or, whatever, and just let your brain wander.
So that's interesting that you said that, because in a previous episode, just the last episode, I was complaining when I go on my stupid walk, hashtag stupid walk that I go on every day, that I had my earbuds and I would listen to podcasts. And so our whole thing on this in this community is to get out of your bubble. And I was taking my bubble with me. Right, I wasn't unplugging on my walk, and so I unplugged on that walk, and I was so bored, and then it rained for a couple of days, so I didn't have to address the issue again for a while, and but I did not like being bored. But then you said just now that you get a lot of ideas in the shower, which is where I like so I super outline when I write a screenplay, like to the super detail. And but when I'm stuck in the outlining process, that's usually where, when I'm driving with no radio on, or when I'm in the shower, that's normally where I have that breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but you're telling me I need to stay unplugged on my stupid walk, because then I would have breakthroughs on the walk as well.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. And I think there's a connection there too with noticing. So even though you're walking and you're obviously like there's nothing in front of your face, like all your brain power is going to that podcast to pay attention to that. So maybe you miss out on like a conversation from your neighbors, or even saying hi to your neighbors. Which I'm guilty of that too. Like sometimes when I want to go out and walk, it's me time, so I do put headphones in. That way there's like no interaction. But yeah, that's there's your mind's gonna wander when you're walking, and you're gonna
And we
notice
haven't
more
talked
things as well.
about yet, I'm writing this down for an afterthought. We haven't talked about noticing, and that's one of the pedagogical terms that I teach my students, is noticing.
Yeah.
And that makes total sense. In the article that you sent us about this, I wrote down a quote: "The writer must give themselves a task at which they don't think about what their body's doing." And then it actually gives the example of like going for a walk. And and that's when I said, "Oh, okay, I'll stay unplugged on my stupid walk." But then you just doubled down on that. You've doomed me to a life of no.
So I actually, this is a new thing for me. I just started, well, I usually listen to music on my walks, but yesterday, without knowing you were going to talk about this, I deliberately left my headphones in the car. Because something that I've noticed is that since I've had more access to technology, I like will have headphones all the time. If I'm doing like washing the dishes, cleaning the house, making dinner, walking, like I just all or in the just driving in the car, I always have headphones in. But growing up when I was writing, I would like swing. We had a backyard swing, and I would just swing and think about my story. And that's what I would do. Or I would lay on the deck in the sun and think about my story. Or I would ride my bike and think about my story. And as a worry, I think part of my addiction to headphones is that I'm a worrier, not a warrior, a worrier.
You're
And
both.
thanks. um, and so I often use that as a way to silence those worries. But I have noticed that when I'm working on a story, I have a work in progress. When I do have those silent moments, that's where my mind goes. So it actually is like we've talked a lot about mental health on this podcast. And that's actually been really helpful for me just to have a story to work on that my mind goes to instead of worrying.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. I'm the same way. Like,
Mhm.
if I give my brain a second, like an anxious thought will will, kind of get in there. But I've also I read another book not this year called 10% Happier by Dan Harper. And it's mostly about like meditation and mental health, but the thing that I really liked with the meditation is that it's not about clearing your mind, it's about redirecting your thoughts. So like, when you're breathing, you're focusing on your breathing, but as soon as you notice you're not thinking about that anymore, you're supposed to pivot and think back to
Yeah.
your breathing. And so I think that practice can be applied to like if you are having those unplugged moments where you're like, you start to have the anxious thoughts, like maybe you could move to like a chapter, like maybe you think
Mhm.
about this chapter that you've written, or a poem that you're working on and you don't know how to end it or something like that, and practice more redirecting your thoughts rather than just silencing them completely.
Yeah, or even what you were talking about earlier with being mindful of like noticing the things around you if you're going for a walk. This was actually something I had to do yesterday because I started worrying while I was on my walk because I didn't have anything to fill my brain. So I was just like, oh, look at these cicadas, or it was mostly cicadas. Um, but look at, notice the things around you, notice how you feel.
Mhm.
Um, and once you've done that, that leaves a little bit more room for other thoughts to come in as well.
Yeah.
When did you first notice this, Adrian?
Notice what?
Uh, the boredom is necessary. Like
Yeah.
when did all this come into your writing life?
So I think that I feel like it's always been there to a degree, but I didn't have like the words for it. Like when I read Stolen Focus, I was like, whoa, all makes sense, like all coming together. But even in college, like if we would have, poems due or something like that, and I like couldn't write, I would be like, okay, I'm going to stop and I'm going to go take my shower. I'm going to go do these things to kind of like step away for a minute.
Mm.
That way, when like I come back, it's kind of like fresh. So I think this has like kind of been a practice of mine for a while. All the pieces finally came together like after I read this book, and I was like, oh, it's all connected.
So the reason I asked was when Emily just said when she was a child that she was swinging on the swing, like, but obviously this concept wasn't in our brains at that time when we were children. Do you have a child moment like that? When you were processing your creativity?
I can't think of like a specific moment, but like I have been writing since I was a kid. Like when I was younger, I would write short stories, and like
Mhm.
our library had like short story like competitions for certain age groups, and I like entered and like won a couple of those. But I think it wasn't such like a big deal to just do nothing as a kid, like
Yeah.
back when we were kids, as it is now. Like, I mean, not to say that we didn't have like television, or, I had my Game Boy Advance or whatever, and
Mhm.
I read a ton too. Like, a lot of people might not like this. I didn't like it. I was like, oh, reading is also kind of the same, even though like I take a book everywhere and whatever, even though I feel better about spending my time that way than like picking up my phone, like it's still like engaging my brain in something. But
Mhm.
I think there were more times where we would just like go ride our bikes or just go walk around the yard or just be outside and walking or sitting in the house playing with toys or whatever. So I think that was probably more common than it is today.
Mhm.
So when you sent us that article, and we'll put this article in the show notes,
Yeah.
and so they
Mhm.
can read the whole. thing, and but the first 5 words of the article I noticed were "when I was a child." So, as a John Prine expert, Adrian, is that why you read that article, because it started with "when I was a child"?
No.
And does the song come into your brain to finish the rest of the lyric
Oh my
before you
gosh.
read the article?
No, I didn't even think of that. I was actually
Dude, yes, you did.
so I was actually looking up that concept too. This is kind of embarrassing. I was trying to find a quote from the book instead of trying to look through the book to see if I marked it, and that article came up.
Oh, that's great.
Mm.
So that also reminds me, because the first part says, when I was a child, my mother used to tell me that boredom was just a lack of imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me think of, I recently read a book called The Liturgy of the Ordinary, and she tells a story of a professor who is assigning his students, it's like Confessions by Augustine or something like that. It's like one of those heavier, denser texts. And the student is just like, I cannot read this. It's too boring. And the professor says, it's not boring. You're boring. And it's that idea of like boredom happens when we aren't like, we're not filling the space with our own thoughts. So that like those silences are really boring if our minds are boring. That's what that made me think of. And so I
Yeah,
don't know what to do with that.
I think it's interesting though, like when people say they get like bored reading like a certain book and stuff, like I think to a degree, if you are getting bored reading a book, like if it's not for a class, like find it, when it comes to reading, there's so much to read. You should just
Yeah,
you should move on. But I have
absolutely.
noticed myself, even if I am like reading, trying to read something that I am interested, like sometimes that's another time when my mind will wander, I guess, because I read so much. Like I have a habit of reading that sometimes I am like staring at my book, but I'm not like reading. Like my mind has
Yep,
gone somewhere,
absolutely.
somewhere else.
So, another theme of this show is that everything is connected. And I think our brain notices. I can't believe we haven't talked about noticing before. Thank you, Adrian. Our brain notices these connections, and would you contend that those connections? I don't want to say an empty brain, but a bored brain makes those searches harder for those connections than a preoccupied brain.
I wouldn't say like it's harder. I think that it's probably like easier to make those connections when you're not preoccupied because your brain is like doing so much work on its own. Our bodies are so cool, they just like do all these things without us having to do a thing. So I think it's easier for them to make those connections. Another like instance that I thought of when this happens is like when you're getting ready for bed, like if you don't have on like the TV or music or something and you're laying there trying to fall asleep, like don't you always think like, oh, I should write this or I should do this, or like you start thinking about your day or what's coming up, and like I feel like that's the time for me when my mind like wanders the most and is like trying to make connections. And I think you guys have talked about this before, is like your brain, like as a human, you just want to make patterns, like, and
Mhm.
make connections and relate things to other things. Like that's how our minds work.
Yeah.
So to the viewers at home, or the listeners at home, and the viewers, obviously I'm staring at a computer screen, and these two women have this connection at their, and it's so I'm not bored at all, but my brain is like, if I don't say this, I'm going to explode. They're both sourdough baker women, and
Nice.
and
I didn't know that.
so would my brain know that if I was bored? I think it would, but my brain also has 140 tabs open, and that's one of the tabs is Adrian sourdough on her Instagram, and Emily talking about her sourdough on the show. So what do I do with all that information?
I don't know. That's a good point. But I think that maybe those connections are made because like you have Emily and I together, and maybe you're trying to think of like what do we have in common, or something like that, or you're like, I know both of them like separately and maybe not together, and they both make sourdough.
Yeah.
Well, you two
So
have
the
have
connection.
Marcy in common as well.
Yes.
That's true.
Marcy likes when we mention her on the show.
Yes. Shout out.
So Emily, in a sentence or two, teach Adrian about the language thing of sourdough, and then, or not the language, but the passing down from generations.
I'm
And
sure she does.
Adrian, teach Emily about the scoring patterns.
Oh, man.
Real quick.
Here's the thing. I'm sure she already knows that sourdough can be passed down from through generations, because you're just continually feeding it new things, and it's continuing to grow, continuing to survive. Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that there is a starter out there that has existed for like hundreds, if not
Yes.
like 1,000 years.
Yeah, we talked about that one. Yeah.
So
Crazy.
all these.
Amazing.
So I'm the only one on Earth that didn't know this.
But
Apparently,
I will say I don't know much about scoring, because the recipe book that I use, he doesn't score. And so I
Interesting.
just don't either. But like, so I don't really know the benefits of it anything.
So scoring is more like, it is definitely like part aesthetic, like it's beautiful,
Yeah,
like
yes.
different scoring patterns and stuff. I don't have that in me. Like I just do like a big X and let it go. But when the bread is like rising, that's somewhere for that air to go, so it doesn't create its own cracks in it. Like you are kind of controlling where that air is escaping from when it's rising.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
you just totally downplayed that. So, I just make a big X. I've seen one where it looked like a beautiful feather.
Oh,
And I just make an X. I just stab it with a knife.
I do. No, there are some very elaborate scoring patterns out there. Like I've seen where people will lay like a doily over the dough and like sprinkle flour on it, so like the pattern is in there, and they will like follow it with like a razor or scoring knife or whatever, and it's crazy. Yeah.
What's neat about one of the reasons why we talked about sourdough is that's another thing that, like in bird watching, right, are things that people are going back to doing that would be considered boring. Like to bring the conversation full circle, like it's a slow process, and sometimes I do it without listening to anything, and you're just enjoying that process.
Yeah, it's very like I don't know, you just get in some sort of like other headspace, like when you're like kneading the dough, and messing with it and stuff, and it is a slow process, and I think there is something to be said. I don't know what that is, but there's something to be said about a lot of people, especially our age, going back to more slow kind of like hobbies and practices, like bird watching and sourdough and like fermenting of any kind, gardening. It is not an instant gratification kind of thing, like the way our society is built. Like we have the internet, like we have this whole hustle culture. We can go to a restaurant and pick up food immediately without having to cook it. Like we can get stuff shipped to our house overnight. Like I think there is something to be said about that. And I think that like writing too is another like very slow practice.
Yeah, for sure.
So maybe someday when I'm as old as you two, I will understand this more fully. I can connect these now though to writing. So you started to say that the scoring is this outer adornment, right? But it doesn't change the flavor of the sourdough, right? And so compare that, right, to the essence of the sourdough, to the essence of the loaf that you just made, to people that put all the frills and bells and whistles on a poem as opposed to getting to the heart of a poem.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so I think that frills and bells and whistles can be fun for sure. There are definitely poems that I like that are more about like just the language and the feel of the words, and the imagery, more than what it's saying. But I think that there's a time and a place for both. Like it's very fun when you can connect the two, when you can have, you know, interesting language, and also be saying something with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have another, so this is going in a little bit of a different direction, but something in the article made me think about this. I talk about Brandon Sanderson a lot on this on this podcast because he's one of my favorite writers right now. And he writes fantasy. And in one of his books, I want to think it was Tress of the Emerald Sea, he has an artist character who's the narrator, or artistic, I would say, character. And he says, and you can tell that Brandon Sanderson is saying this, not just the character. And I'm going to get the quote wrong, but it's something along the lines of, if you are an artist, sell your labor, not your mind. That is when you have a second job. So, like, most writers have another job.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious what you all think about this. Most writers have another job, and he's basically suggesting have a job that is more hands-on, something that you're doing. This is what the article says, something that you can do with your body but not occupy your mind, so that during the day your mind still has time to think about your writing. As a teacher, I can't do that. There's no way I can plan teaching or stay in the classroom and think about writing at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, if what are the things that you do? One, can you think about writing during your job? And then two, what are things that you can do and think about writing at the same time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my job, I'm a copy editor, but I work for an auditing firm, like an information security auditing firm. So the stuff that I read is very technical. And I do produce things for work in other capacities, but I am not writing these reports. Like my brain is not focusing on the things that our writers are doing, which is like taking information, organizing it into a narrative, making sure we have like proper formal word choice, etc. So I am mostly looking for like the technical things. Like when I read through, like, is the grammar okay? Is the punctuation okay? Does it make sense when I read it together? Like, does it flow? And I think that helps me a lot because it's, even though it is writing related, it's not creative writing. Like I am not having to come up with something like out of thin air, or take something and be like, turn it into this. And I do a little bit of that for sure, but like our main reports, my main job is to edit. So I am still in a writing mode, but it's with the technical part, which I also think is fun to play with, the punctuation and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think I'm the same way, where I've actually thought about doing more creative jobs, like creative marketing or something like that. And I'm like, I need to save that resource for my own work, right? I would rather do more of the technical stuff for my job and then save the creative work for my own work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I have heard so a lot of the writers that I work with are were English majors, whether that be professional writing or, English or whatever. But they, they also enjoy writing and reading, and sometimes they don't feel like doing it for fun, because they have had to put a lot of brain power into creating a report.
Right,
for work.
exactly.
So,
Jon Meyers, do you have any thoughts on that?
I have no thoughts on this. So my brain wandered to, well, so everything that Adrian just said makes sense. And so I'm contrasting an engaged brain with, so I'm trying to put this in, I'm trying to put my thoughts into words. I'm contrasting her engaged brain that's looking at accounting documents that she has to edit versus, but so when John Prine was on his mail route, and Adrian used to be a mail person, a mail delivery person, but you were a clerk though. So you didn't walk a route, right?
No, no, I worked in the office. So when the mail came in the morning, I would help sort it for the clerks. And then when our office opened, I was helping ship stuff. I put stuff into the PO boxes. But it was more of a customer service type job.
So when he would walk his route, he like before he died, he would talk about how boring that was and what a great job for a songwriter, because his mind, he's walking like we were talked about before, but it didn't require, after the sorting was done, after what Adrian did was done, right? It didn't require anything other than showing up at the right house and then making sure a dog didn't bite you. And so his brain could create the masterpieces that he would create. And so it's got to be different. Like, even though you're putting things in a box and sort, even though you're sorting and you're doing customer service, it still has to be different. Engages a different part of your brain than doing technical editing.
Yeah, and I worked, so the offices that I worked in were rural offices. So like there was an office that I worked in. I would be lucky if I talked to like 2 people that day. So I guess I can say this now that I don't work for them anymore. I watched a lot of movies. I read. I wrote. Like
Yep.
the post office. The post office is kind of like, you have your tasks that you do at the beginning and the end of your shift, but as a clerk, like in the middle, like you were there to help people. Like I could clean and I could, do whatever, and still find things to be busy and to, I could stock and whatever else. But there was a lot of downtime. And my work in progress is actually inspired by my time at the post office, because
Nice.
I just did a lot of, roaming around myself, and I met a lot of interesting people, and so I want to get that out and write about it and explore it and see what comes out of it.
That's awesome.
So here's my brain making connections for the people listening in their car driving. Adrian has on a Bob Dylan shirt on right now. So my brain went from Prine to Dylan, the poet bard of songwriting, to a tortured poet that Adrian's going to be our resident Taylor Swift expert. This is our 16th episode, and Taylor Swift has never come up before. This is incredible.
Wow.
Do something with that, Adrian.
Oh man, just run with it.
Okay.
Here's a hot take.
Some people are saying that she is a poet.
Yeah, like I feel like that's not uncommon to call songwriters and lyricists poets. I mean, like Bob Dylan, John Prine, Patti Smith, like incredible. I do think that I think that's kind of getting into like subjectivity there, like what is poetry, or rather, like as far as music goes, like what sounds like poetry to me, like what I would want to read on a page, like might be different for somebody else. But I can definitely understand why people, like give that to her. And it makes sense that her trajectory would like bring her to that, because like Folklore, her albums Folklore and Evermore were a lot about storytelling, and she like created characters and stuff like that. So I think that was like a natural progression. She also found out sometime, I don't know the time span between it was made public and when she found out, but she is related to Emily Dickinson, which I am very jealous of.
What?
But yeah, it's crazy. I'm not sure it's like something, so many cousins, something removed, but yeah, she's related to Emily Dickinson, which is super cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Any final words for the listeners about boredom, or encouragement to listeners who may be addicted to their technology?
Oh man, it's hard to put it down. Those phones, specifically those apps, people are paid to keep you on them. They are paid to come up with ways to keep you on, the endless scroll and the algorithm and things like that. So I recently deleted social media off my phone. I saw my accounts, but I can only check them when I'm on my laptop, which is not super often. And also the laptop interfaces are not as user friendly as the phone, so that also helps like deter me a little bit. Like I check my notifications, I'm like, I don't want to scroll through this. So so that helps a lot. But if you're having a hard time, you know, getting off of them, it's not your fault. Like people are paid to do that and to take advantage of that. But you know, if you feel the urge to pick up your phone, like try to notice that and maybe leave it. You know, like if you're standing in line at the grocery and you're like, oh, there's two people in front of me, like just hang out, just like look around and listen to people rather than like pick up your phone. You know, if you try to make a mental note of how much you do it, it's kind of crazy how much you reach for it.
Yeah, that actually might be an interesting thing to like write down, like every time you picked up the phone
Yeah.
that day. I mean, my phone does send me like screen time alerts too, like
Mm-hmm.
every week or so they'll be like, this is your screen time this week, it went up or it went down, and it's really rewarding when it goes down.
Yeah.
So you have a call to action for our listeners.
I do. So it is kind of related to what I just said. So take some time when you're out. I know it's hard to like leave your phone at home, maybe leave it in your bag or your car or something when you go inside a grocery store or, you know, go shopping, whatever. Like try to have a day where you don't use your phone to fill up your attention and just see what you notice. People watch. If you want to, you can maybe write a little poem about it or incorporate it into a story or think of how someone might be an interesting character. There's so much out there to notice and to put into our work.
I love that so much. So listeners, you can respond to that in our show notes at writebettertogether.com/podcast. You could also respond to our Facebook post when this episode comes out. We'll write down the call to action. You can respond there at Write Better Together now on our Facebook page.
There you go.
There you
I would
go.
like to commend Adrian, as she was our first no, I shouldn't say that. She's been our first guest in a while who didn't deny her area of expertise. So, sometimes we'll introduce someone and they're like, "Oh, I'm not an expert," but you've been an expert on Boredom, Sourdough, and Taylor Swift.
There you
Good,
go.
good job.
Thank you
Parting
so much.
question. What? Go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having
Yeah,
me. This was fun.
thank you. The parting question is, I was going to have you say goodbye, or I guess it's not a question. It's a hoop I'm going to make you jump through. Say goodbye to our audience as a roller derby woman.
Oh, interesting. I don't know how I would do that. I think do I need to like, you know, check my laptop like
Aren't you a character?
a character?
Don't you have a roller derby character?
It wasn't really a character. It was like more of just like a
Persona?
name. Yeah.
Well, say goodbye as that name. Tell them that name and say goodbye as that name.
My derby name was the Flog Lady, and my log is telling me to say goodbye.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And we're back in the future. Now what? That was great, by the way. We learned. I learned that I'm the only one that didn't know that sourdough has a 200-year-old genesis to the
Well, she does
sandwich
make
I just
sourdough.
ate.
I'm sure there's a lot of people who learned that for the first time.
Oh, okay.
I'm laughing because of the future comment, because I had just said
I know.
we're going to be back in the future because we just took our listeners back into the past, and yeah.
I'm glad you explained that to them.
That has me giggling. Okay. Oh man. Hey, Jon Meyers.
Yes, I get
You
to
ready to
learn
learn
something.
Another new thing?
Yes.
Do you know what the largest organism on Earth is?
Organism. Do I even know what the word organism is? Like,
It's a living thing, not necessarily sentient. Like basically plants and animals are organisms. Plants and bacteria and things like that. Anything alive.
okay. So an organization comprised of live things is not an organism. The UN is not an organism,
No.
even though it's full of a
Organization.
bunch of. It's an organization full of
This is a
organisms.
single organism.
A what?
This is a single
A
organism.
single organism, the
so
largest
the
one.
largest.
I have to guess that it would be something related. Can you see it?
Yes.
Oh, never mind. I was going to guess some form of bacteria.
Nope.
No, I don't know.
But
You
it's
stumped me again. What? Go ahead. But it's what?
It's similar to that. It is a mushroom.
Oh, a specific mushroom.
Yes. But there's probably like this is like the one that has been observed. This one is in Oregon's Blue Mountains, and it occupies 2,384 acres. Or nearly 4 square miles, or 1,665 football fields.
So I actually know how large that is because I honestly read this, not this, but I read about Lake Tulane, and I thought you were going to try to stump me with Lake Tulane. And so Lake Tulane in California has come back, and it's a lake
Went somewhere?
yeah, it's a lake that disappeared. It's come back in the last 200 years. It's only come back 3 times, and so people like build houses because it's gone, right? And then it comes back, and then they're like, oh no, like farm workers and stuff are displaced, and so it is now down to 2,300 acres. And so I saw the picture of it, so I can picture this mushroom as big as this lake. That's giant. You're saying one mushroom?
Yes. So here's something that I didn't know for a long time, but like when you buy like a button mushroom or
when you buy a button mushroom,
you don't eat mushrooms. Okay.
No. Well, I mean,
when people buy mushrooms, what you're getting are not like individual organisms. They're all one. It's one mushroom. It's one.
So I eat mushroom soup. That's just a chopped up mushroom.
Yeah, but it's all one mushroom, because they're fruit. So what we consider a mushroom is actually the fruit of a larger organism that is underground. It's webby. It's called mycelium, and it's all underground. So recently, you sent me a picture of a tree, and it said that trees have a communication network, and you were like, hey, don't try to stump me with this.
Yeah.
I found another way to stump you with it. Do you know how trees communicate? They have a communication network?
Dead silence.
This is the same topic. I'm not introducing a new topic.
Through electricity.
Through the same topic that we just
through mushrooms?
Through mushrooms.
But isn't it through electrical impulses? So you're saying the electrical impulses go through the mushrooms?
Okay, well, if there's electrical impulses, you need to let me know about that too. But I didn't know about the electrical impulses, so
I mean, I might be misremembering it, but you think it's magic, so.
So yes, definitely tell me about that next time. But they also communicate, and communication is a strong word for this, but basically what's happening is mushroom mycelium, which is like the web stuff, the white web stuff underground, is clinging to trees, to the roots of trees, and they're transferring nutrients. But trees can actually decide where to send those nutrients. So like if you have like a maple tree and it's like, hey, there's a bunch of little baby maple trees around me and they need nutrients because they're not getting enough sunlight, that mama tree is going to send nutrients through the mushrooms to those baby trees. So they're like nurturing each other. So trees are actually, because I think there's like that idea of like, well, the tallest tree is the one it's dominant and it's taking over all the other trees, but they're actually like helping each other, like little parents saying, hey, I just created a bunch of trees out of my seeds and now I'm going to go feed them through the mushrooms.
Across different tree species?
They will choose to give nutrients mostly to the ones that are the same species. They are
Oh,
a little speciesist. Yeah.
they're speciesists.
Yeah.
So they have, the thing I read said they have fear.
Okay.
So, but I don't know if it's they see a guy with an axe and they have fear, or if it's probably more likely if storm is coming they have fear, right?
Mhm.
Lightning
Yeah.
is coming, they have fear.
Yeah.
So you're saying
I
that.
think I have heard something like that too. Yes.
So you're saying that fear impulse goes through them. That the tree decides to send it west through that mushroom to his friends and not east to the other species.
Well, I'm more talking about them sharing nutrients
Oh, okay.
to others. But I have heard, and this is going to be getting into the things that I don't know. I have heard that, like, for instance, if there's a fire, like, say there's a fire a mile away, that the trees are can send signals through that mycelium that can let the other trees know that there's a fire. Like, again, this is getting
Quick,
into
run.
yeah, run. Yeah, what are you gonna do about it? Now you've stumped me with the electrical signals, but I've actually used this as a magic system in my books. And it's become a lot more common lately. You'll hear a lot of like fantasy stories inspired by mushrooms, so I'm like, I got to get on that.
And I might be wrong. It might have been a word that I assumed was electrical word, like
Maybe.
neuron or something,
Yeah.
and it didn't mean it was electricity.
Well, now we've got to see if we had a producer, we could just be like, "Hey, Google this thing for us," but
Hey,
we
Adrian, look that up for us.
can't. All right.
Cool. I learned something.
Yeah. um, if you want to learn more weird facts with us and maybe find out in the future if we're going to talk about trees and electricity, then be sure to subscribe to our show so that you always have updates. Also, we would love for you to write a review so that other people can find us.
Yes, I
Indeed.
agree. Find us, please.
Find us. All right. It's time for the final act. So, I don't know if I've told you this, but my husband John and I are going through every animated Disney movie chronologically.
No, I did not know this.
So, I thought I could test your knowledge on the chronology
Which comes
of
first, this or
of the
that?
Disney films.
Is that what you're doing?
I was thinking, could you Oh, actually, that's almost a better game idea. Hmm.
The local radio hosts, they'll be like, Mount Rushmore was built, John F. Kennedy was shot, and we whatever invented penicillin. Put those in order. And like, I
Hmm.
never know the order.
This is a better idea. I was just going to have you name them in chronological order 1 through 10. The first 10 animated
You were gonna
movies.
say, "Hey, John Myers, what are the first 10 Disney animated movies?"
Yeah.
Oh, in, in order.
I like your idea better.
Well, first of all, I could not do that.
Yeah.
What's my prize that I'm not gonna win?
All right. Your prize is a door stopper. So, no. This is The Illusion of Life by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson.
Oh,
And it is the most
I'll take it.
beautiful. It's a gorgeous book that teaches you animation. And when I was younger, I wanted to be a Disney animator, and so I read the whole thing. And it's brilliant. I don't think it's in print anymore.
Great! I can't wait to win it with this impossible game you've given me.
Well, let's do your game. In fact, do we start over with me just pretending like I was going to do that game, or do we just keep that?
Keep going. I like that. I like this. I like that the game evolved in
It
front of our
evolved.
listeners.
Yours is so much better than
The
mine.
listeners can still play the first game if they want.
All right, let's see if you can get 2 out of 3 correct.
Okay.
Okay. So here's gonna be the movies, and then you list them in order.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to write them down. So you're giving them to me out of order.
Right.
And then I'm putting them in order?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Ready.
Let me write them down first.
And I'm not Googling. Me looking down for the people watching on YouTube. I'm just writing them down on this pad of paper. I'm not. And you should be doing that too. We want our listeners and viewers to play along with me. Because Emily has 100 copies of that book that she's going to give away. Not really.
Okay. Here are the movies. All right. Alice in Wonderland.
Okay.
Cinderella.
Okay.
Peter Pan.
Okay.
And Bambi.
Okay. And I'm just ranking these 4 from first to last.
Yeah. And listeners, do this before you hear the answer, and then let us know if you got it right.
If you're right or not. Do I get years not in order? Do I get years? Not like the first year was this and the last year is that?
Do you want those? Do you want the years?
Heck yeah.
Okay. The first one was in 1942.
Okay.
The second is 1950.
Okay.
Third is 1951.
Okay.
And fourth is 1953.
I just wanted a range, but but I'll take this. I didn't stop you. So I'm guessing. So 42, 50, 53, and what? I can't read the other one that I just wrote down.
I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
42,
50, 50,
53. Oh, 51 is the one I can't read. Okay.
And 53.
All right. I will say 53 goes to Bambi.
Okay.
Oh, you're not going to tell me if I'm right or not?
But then it'll affect the rest of your answers.
The rest of my wrong answers. 42 is Cinderella.
You mean 50? Oh, gotcha.
No, I picked the earliest and the latest, in my opinion.
Okay, gotcha.
And the other two are just a year apart, so who knows? I guess 50 is Alice in Wonderland and 51 is Peter Pan. That's my guess.
Okay, so wrong.
Were any of them right?
No. Best 2 out of 3? Do we want to do more?
Is Baggie still around here somewhere? Too bad you killed Baggie.
So Bambi is first, 1942. Then
No
Cinderella
way.
in 1950, Alice in Wonderland 1951, and Peter Pan in 1953.
Okay. And you only have 10 in front of you? Is what you're saying?
What?
You only have 10 in front of you and we just did 4 of them? Is that what you're saying?
I have all of them in front of me.
I don't know that I could do the most recent 10. Give me. You have all of them, like all in the history of the world from 42 to 2023.
Do you think you could guess the first 2?
Snow White.
Correct.
But then there's like Steamboat Willie and Mickey Mouse flying around in an airplane before Snow White. So you're only talking about features.
Yes, feature films.
Plain Crazy, I think it was called.
Snow White is correct. That was the first one. Do you know the second one? If you do, you'll get this book.
You'll tear a page out of that book.
It's 50 pounds.
I feel like there is Sleeping Beauty.
That one's a bit later.
Oh, those parrots of Pinocchio. Pinocchio. So when were the parrots? The three caballeros. When were they?
They're a little bit further. They were. Well, so this list includes a few live action, and I wasn't including live action, but
The
that
computer
one
who
is
wore tennis shoes.
that one is 1945.
The three caballeros.
Yeah,
I
which
met them
actually
once.
it was not bad.
I met them once. The three caballeros.
What? Amazing.
All right.
Well, that was a
Thanks.
hard game. I apologize.
They're getting harder.
I have a hard Hey, I have a call to action. Listeners, give us ideas for these games.
I have games lined up for the next 10 episodes when it's my turn. I've like and they're easy.
Oh man. Okay.
All right. Good job.
Thanks, I guess.
Was that it? I think
That was it.
I think the listeners and viewers did better than I did on that game, so we can honestly say
Yeah.
that
We couldn't
couldn't
have done it without
done it
you.
without you. I love that our tagline is like the most awkward thing on the entire podcast.
Well, that's my favorite thing.